by a double health scare which has left three frontline royals out of action. King Charles and his daughter-in-law are both undergoing medical treatment in hospital, with the Princess of Wales not set to return to public duties until after Easter. Meanwhile, her husband, Prince William, who today visited her in hospital, has taken time off while she recovers from abdominal surgery. Joining me now, Sarah Houston, talkTV's royal editor, and also joining us is Dr. Ed Owen, royal historian and commentator. Welcome to you both. I mean, Sarah, the palace have talked for years and worked very diligently to get this slimmed down monarchy. I never thought it was going to look this slim, frankly. There's hardly anybody left.
It's kind of happened by default, hasn't it? Yes, and we really are seeing, I think, the void left by Harry and Meghan at the moment, because if you look at those left to hold the fort, while we take the Prince and Princess of Wales out of the equation, while Kate is recovering from her operation, the King, OK, it's a short period of time where he's going to be off duty. But then you look to the rest of the royal family. Princess Anne, who we know is the hardest working royal. You've got the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. They're very, very busy, but they don't get a lot of attention for what they do. Princess Anne was in Sri Lanka last week. Many people won't have even realised because it doesn't get that much publicity. The Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, the Duke of Kent, you know, they're heading up past retirement age.
Yeah, of course.
And so that is where I think you see that the loss of the Sussexes, particularly, who would now be relied on to pick up a lot of those duties.
It's interesting you say that, because we were talking in the office, you know, Prince Harry called his book Spare. You're a spare for a reason, you know. Just in case there's no one, you may well be the person that's called upon. I don't think that's going to happen, but it is rather interesting that, as you say, this would have been an obvious moment that Meghan would undoubtedly have stepped into the shoes of Kate's appointments and vice versa, and that's how I would imagine it would have worked.
Look, they all have their own charities and organisations that they support, but they do come together and rally round. And I think, you know, it is going to be difficult for those organisations that are missing out on their visits, and they'll be postponed and happen later in the year. And there were supposed to be international visits, a trip to Rome, for example, by the Prince and Princess of Wales. That'll have to be rescheduled for later on in the year. Buckingham Palace, it pays to stress that the King's not off duty. There's never going to be a point at which he's unable to carry out his constitutional duties. It just means he's not going to be travelling the length and breadth of the country and shaking hands with everyone while he recovers. And that's a period of days, more likely, rather than the 2 to 3 months where we see the Princess of Wales recovering.
Is it a problem? Would the royals be aware that the... You know, I said at the beginning, rightly or wrongly, it does fit that you get moments that you couldn't have imagined, like this, that does force you into thinking about the royal family, about you know, what is the reason it's still there? And, you know, it's slimmed down. Could it be slimmed down further? And if it was slimmed down further again, there's another uncomfortable question that has to be asked.
We talked for many years about what the reign of King Charles was going to look like, and one of his first priorities was said to be slimming down the monarchy to make it fit for the modern age and make it more affordable for the taxpayer, particularly in a cost of living crisis. There's a new book out today by Robert Hardman, and he talks about that and says, actually, you know, we haven't really seen that in action because it's happened. The Duke of Edinburgh died, the Queen died, the Duke of York is in disgrace, the Duke of Sussex is in California. So it's happened anyway. And as Princess Anne pointed out in an interview last year, you know, how much more... It's not very sensible to slim us down further. How much more do you think the rest of us could do? Now, Republicans would argue a lot more. But I think this is where you see the roles that they do undertake when you take them out. You know, you don't know what you're missing until it's gone. Next month, for example, is World Mental Health Awareness Week. We would have expected to see a lot of high-profile engagements around that by the Prince and Princess of Wales. That's one of their big causes. And of course, that's now not going to happen. Let's
bring in Dr. Ed Owens, royal historian. Afternoon to you, Ed.
Good afternoon.
I mean, if you go back a few years, you know, 30, 40 years, or certainly when I was a kid, it seemed like there were thousands of members of the royal family. It was like the Saudi royals almost. You know, you couldn't really name them. There were so many of them. Extended people. Those balcony scenes were just crammed full. You couldn't get them on there, for goodness sake. And now there's about half a dozen of them left. What would the predecessors have made of this?
I think they've been quite surprised. We've got to put, if you like, the current moment in its historical context. And you're absolutely right, 1980s, early 1990s, the royal family was much bigger still, a much more expanded royal family. You only need to think to the sort of the Golden Jubilee photographs of the palace scene in 2002. Far more, if you like, prominent members of that family on the balcony than we've seen at recent royal events. The idea of a big royal family really dates back to the start of the 20th century, and it was a period in which the monarchy found itself in crisis. It needed to demonstrate its relevance to the British public because there were quite a lot of members of the British public not that enamored with monarchy. So the kings and queens of that period took it upon themselves to popularize the royal family by emphasizing that the royal family were do-gooders, that they would be sent out to all corners of the country to engage with ordinary people in new ways. And it was absolutely necessary to have a big royal family to undertake the work of monarchy in that respect. And the Elizabethan monarchy, Queen Elizabeth II's monarchy, very much embodied that idea of the expanded and enormous royal family undertaking the work of monarchy. And as we just heard, King Charles always said that he intended to slim down this institution. And yet he finds himself on the throne with much royal work to be done and fewer royals to do it. Yeah. So he finds himself in something of a quandary in that respect. And it does beg the bigger, more profound question as to whether the 20th century model of monarchy, with this big royal family, whether that model is in fact fit for purpose in the 21st century.
And I was just thinking as you were answering that, Ed, has the royals in the past, I mean, putting Cromwell aside for one moment, have they ever gone through a period where they would have had to have seriously considered the institution of monarchy as having a future? Or is this very new territory?
No, there were plenty of moments when the future of monarchy looked as though it was really in doubt. When Queen Victoria came to the throne and in the middle 1830s, the monarchy had been disgraced by the behavior of her three predecessors, George III, his son George IV, and William IV. The institution, though broadly popular with the British elite, had struggled to find a way to connect with ordinary people. And there was a lot of radical writing in the middle of the 19th century about whether this institution would last. That was, if you like, the great moment of British republicanism in the last 150 to 200 years. And we saw another moment of sort of severe crisis at the end of the First World War. King George V, Elizabeth II's grandfather, was again left sort of asking the question, how do I make this institution relevant and meaningful to a working class who have just got the vote and among whom there are many sort of radical elements that would be quite happy to see the end of my monarchy. And again, he had to sort of rethink what monarchy was for then. So no, these moments of sort of crisis periodically sort of arise. I do think we're in a sort of a slow crisis at the moment, really stemming from about 10 years ago, that the monarchy hasn't quite come to terms with in terms of setting out a vision of a monarchy that's sort of ready for really the middle of the 21st century. But it's not really affected by the events of the last couple of days with the news of the ill health of both King Charles.
No, indeed. The argument I was putting forward, Ed, was merely that it sort of oddly, and I didn't expect it myself, it sort of provided a bit of a catalyst to expand the more general argument about royalty. And what's interesting about what you were saying there, Ed, and Sarah, if I can put this to you, about almost reinvention of royalty. It wasn't that long ago, and I can remember thinking, you know, the Queen had a bit of a torrid time, and the royal family were they were always around, obviously, but not much seemed to be going on. Support seemed to be dwindling. And then this, you know, young, good-looking fella called Prince Harry met a young, good-looking girl called Meghan Markle. And I remember thinking, that is it. This is the change. This is going to be amazing. This will bring in a whole new support for royalty. And I think it would have done, but of course it went horribly wrong. And that's never going to come back, I don't imagine. But we do have others. I mean, I was thinking, what about Zara and Mike Tyndall? They've just been in Australia, where apparently they are absolutely really popular.
But
and they were popular because they were normal.
They're normal, and that's the point, isn't it? They can say what they want. So I don't know whether you've ever listened to Mike Tyndall's rugby podcast.
Yes,
and, you know, he says it how it is. Zara has been raised to be pretty down to earth. You know, living a very privileged life, but actually having to earn a living for herself and get on with it. And I think they are appreciated because they are normal. And I certainly don't think they have any desires whatsoever to join the working ranks of the royal family and give up that freedom
and they probably
and
wouldn't
life.
want to, because they've seen what happens around them. And a mate of mine who works in commentary bumps into Zara every now and again, and every time she sees him, she just says, "All right, mate." And you think, wow, that's incredible.
Well, I mean...
this is the King's granddaughter, the Queen's granddaughter, who just seems, as you rightly say, a very normal person, married to a rugby player.
They took part in the podcast with Rob Burrow, the motor neurone disease sufferer, rugby league hero, and that's where Mike Tyndall revealed his nickname for William. One Pint Willie.
That's
and
right.
Zara's in the background laughing, "You're going to be in so much trouble." Refreshingly normal, but probably because they haven't had to do the same as the cousins.
And they're not likely to, you don't say.
But it is right, what we see when you take the Prince and Princess of Wales out of the equation, the loss of Harry and Meghan, we're losing that sprinkling of stardust that the royal family so desperately
and youth
needs.
as well.
Yeah.
There it is.